May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be always acceptable to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. Well, today we begin a 3-week journey through chapter 13 of Matthew's Gospel. It's the home of many well-known parables. And each time Jesus starts a new teaching, Matthew will say, and then Jesus told another parable. When we hear the word parable, we often think Jesus is using an illustration to make a difficult truth easier to understand. But Amy Jill Levine, a Jewish New Testament scholar, says that's almost the opposite of what Jesus intended. Jesus' parables are not illustrations that make things easier. They're short stories that make comfortable people uncomfortable. They surprise us, they puzzle us, and they invite us to keep wrestling long after the conversation ends. The parable of the sower, today's example, is a good example of what Dr. Levine is saying. Much of my life, I understood this parable to be about me. What kind of soil am I? Am I the good soil where the seed is able to take root and a veritable Garden of Eden blooms out of my life? Or am I the soil that is so sun-baked and barren that nothing can take root? Certainly that is one way of hearing this parable. But I wonder if there might be more to the story. What if the parable of the sower is really about the sower? If that's the question, then before we begin looking at the soil, we ought to spend a few minutes looking at the one who's carrying the seed bag. Who is this sower? He throws seed everywhere, on the path, on rocks, among thorns, and into good soil. Every farmer hearing that story would be shaking their head. That is not an efficient or strategic way of sowing seed. Throwing seed without regard to where it falls certainly won't yield a good return on investment. And yet Jesus says, this is what God's reign is like. Not because God is careless. God is generous. The world lives in an economy of scarcity, but God's reign is a gift economy. We measure worth. God measures possibility. We calculate outcomes. God scatters gift. We ask whether someone deserves mercy. God simply keeps sowing. We're always asking, will this be enough? And God keeps asking, who else needs to receive? Some seed disappears, some dies, some flourishes. The only constant is the sower. He keeps on sowing. When that seed takes root in human lives, what kind of people does it create? Yesterday I saw a glimpse of an answer to that question. Saturday morning, I woke up with a plan for the day. Walk the dogs, write a sermon, watch a FIFA match, and then prepare for church. And then my phone began to buzz with texts and emails and phone calls. And as I moved from family to family yesterday, I was still processing this parable of the sower. It was in a crowded ICU room, overflowing with family gathered to support one another, that I realized that moment is exactly what the sower seed does. It creates people who move toward suffering rather than away from it. The sower seed changes the world by changing the people who receive it. It creates people who begin to resemble the one who first scattered grace into their lives. Faithful stewardship of that seed is not protecting it. It is sowing the seed. If Matthew had written this sermon, this is the point where he would say, and then there was another parable. There once was a congregation that loved its church building. One day, they lost it. They wondered whether they could survive, so they gathered and worshiped in borrowed space. They baptized children. They buried saints. They visited hospitals and homes. They fed hungry people. They treated lepers. They washed laundry for people who didn't have quarters. They welcomed strangers. They prayed, laughed, cried. Years passed. One day they learned that very likely they would soon have another building. Where was the seed? Was it in the bricks? Was it in the stained glass? Was it in the famous kitchen? Or had the sower been scattering seed into people all along? Soon, God willing, that congregation will unlock the doors of a new home. They'll give thanks, they'll dedicate it, they'll worship there with joy. Yea, God. But every parable has a question hidden within it. The question is no longer whether we can be the church without a building. The question is whether we can remain that church once we have one. The greatest miracle God performed during those years was not preserving a congregation without a building. It was creating a congregation that discovered it had never needed a building to be the church. The harvest was never made of bricks. The harvest was, is, and always will be people. And so when God entrusts us with another building, may we never mistake the gift for the harvest. The building will simply become another field where the sower continues to scatter